So today we're going to be talking about sexual development. In other words, remember when we talked earlier, humans have separate sexes. And so we have males and females. And so we're going to talk about how that forms or how that happens. And so let's go ahead and look at this. So first of all, remember when you talk about humans, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 23 pairs. Well, of those 23 pairs, 22 of those pairs are called autosomes. So 22 pairs are autosomes, and autosomes, they code for things like how tall you're going to be, or what color your hair is going to be, or your eyes, or your skin, or whether or not you're going to be prone to certain diseases or anything like that. In other words, autosomes, auto means self, has to do with what makes you look like you. It has to do with your body type or body itself and all of the things that go along with it. But there's one pair of chromosomes which are called sex chromosomes. And so sex chromosomes are a little bit different from all the others. For one thing, these chromosomes don't look anything alike. Remember when we talk about chromosomes, we talk about them like pairs of shoes because they're alike, but they're not identical. But sex chromosomes aren't really like that. It's like having one shoe and then an odd shoe with it. And we call those chromosomes X and Y. The others just go by numbers, but these go by X and Y. And so when you look at males and females, these sex chromosomes are going to determine what your gender is. Females have 2 X chromosomes. And so when you look at their genome, it looks like this, 2 X chromosomes. Whereas males only have 1 X chromosome and then they have 1 Y. So an X chromosome is really, really big, and a Y chromosome is a little tiny thing like this. So females look like this, whereas males look like this. Well, remember when we make gametes, we're going to split these things up. And what we're going to wind up with are 4 cells that are not alike, and they're not like the original. And so remember, in males, we're going to wind up with 4 sperm. And so what you're going to have in these sperm is either 1 X or 1 Y. So if you look at this sperm, it has an X in it, this big chromosome. But if you look at this sperm, it's a Y, and it has this little bitty piece of a chromosome, this little tiny thing. So if this fertilizes an egg, remember the eggs only have X, then this person is going to have an X from this one and an X from this, and so we're going to get a female. And so that's what that's going to be. But this one, if it fertilizes an egg, again, we're going to only have an X, but this has a Y, then this person is going to be male. And so it's the father that determines the sex of the offspring. It's the sperm that determines the sex of the offspring. Well, when you look at embryos and you look at them originally, they basically look exactly the same. So you might look at this, everybody look at it, and see if you can tell what gender is this fetus. Is it male or female? What do you think? Anybody want to guess? Well, the truth is you can't tell. It's either one. In fact, they look exactly the same. And so at this age, which is about 5 weeks of gestation, they're termed indifferent because they're exactly the same. In other words, sex chromosomes have not really kicked in, and there is no sex. There's no gender here yet. So what's going to happen is something is going to happen to make this turn into a male or a female. Because right now we don't know which one it is. But something is going to happen to make it become one or the other. And so that's what this whole lecture is all about. How do we go from this to being something that looks like a male or something that looks like a female? So again, here, we can't tell what it is. It's this indifferent. It can become really basically either one. Well, let's see what happens. So remember, males have gotten a Y from their father, so they've got this little bitty thing, and then they've gotten an X from their mother, this big thing. And so when you put them back together, we're going to wind up with an X and a Y, one big one and one little one. Well, it's this Y chromosome that's going to determine the gender. Remember, only males have Ys. Females and males both have X's. So it's something to do with this Y chromosome. And there's a single gene on this Y chromosome. It's called the SRY gene. So the SRY gene. So remember, this Y chromosome is very, very small. And it has very few genes on it, actually. Very few. One of the genes that's on here is a gene for hairy ears, which is kind of funny. When I talk about hairy ears, I'm talking about really hairy ears. But that has nothing to do with it. But there's another gene on here that's just called this SRY gene. And this SRY gene is what's important and is what's going to determine maleness. And here's what happens. As development continues, this SRY gene turns on. And it turns on and it codes for something called an HY antigen. And what that HY antigen is going to do is it's going to go to the gonad of this individual. And it's going to cause that gonad to turn into a testis. So we're going to get a testis, and the testis is going to begin to produce testosterone. That's exactly what's going to happen. So here's our SRY gene. It turns on. We get this HY antigen. It's going to go to the testis or the gonad, make it become a testis, and then the testis is going to secrete testosterone. And it's this hormone, this testosterone, that's going to cause the anatomy to look like a male. And so what's going to happen is, here's this indifferent stage. Remember, this is internally. Look, you can't tell. This thing here could become a testis. It might not, though. It could become, this could become, or an ovary. Right here's two sets of tubes. So look, if you look at this set of tubes, they can become the vas deferens. If you look at this set of tubes, they can become the uterine tubes. So right now there's both. You can't tell which one's going to grow. Right here, there's a single opening. It's called a cloaca. Don't know what it's going to be. If we look externally, here's this indifferent stage again. And look, that could become either the gland's penis or it could become the gland's clitoris. We don't know which it's going to become. This can become the labia majora, but it could also become the scrotum. We don't know which it's going to become. And look, there's an opening right here. That opening could stay open or it could close. We don't know which is going to happen. And so it's this testosterone that's going to make the difference. And so what's going to happen with testosterone is, remember there were two sets of tubes in here. One set of tubes is going to grow. This set of tubes is going to grow. And it's going to become this vas deferens. This set of tubes is going to degenerate. It's going to degenerate, so there's not going to be a uterine tube because there's nothing for it to grow from. If you look down here, what we're going to get are the seminal vesicles growing from here, and this urethra is going to elongate. If we look externally, this is what's going to happen. Oh, here's internally again. And so look, that's what it's going to look like at birth. So we're going to go from this to this. If we look externally, remember this is what we looked like before. We didn't know what that was going to become. Well, look, it becomes a glans penis. This opening that we see is going to seal up. Look, it's going to seal up, but you can always see where it used to be. Looks almost like a seam or some sort of ridge there where you can see where this used to be. These are going to become the scrotum. And so when this baby's born, it's going to look very much like a male. Females, on the other hand, remember they don't have a Y chromosome. They only have 2 X chromosomes. Well, if you don't have a Y chromosome, that means you don't have an SRY gene. And if you don't have an SRY gene, you're not going to have this HY antigen. And if you don't have the HY antigen, the gonad automatically is going to become an ovary. And ovaries do not make testosterone. So that means there's going to be no testosterone. And when you have no testosterone, you get a female. And so it looks like this. No Y chromosome, no SRY gene, no HY antigen. We're going to get an ovary, no testosterone. And so it's the absence of testosterone that gives rise to the female. And so if we look at what happens with this, remember here's our indifferent one, but again, we have 2 sets of tubes. Right there's a set of tubes, and right there's a set of tubes. We're going to have this, which is the gonad. And so what's going to happen is that gonad is going to turn into an ovary. And we're not going to get any testosterone. And without testosterone, look, these tubes degenerate. And so there's no vas deferens that's going to grow. These tubes continue to grow, and they're going to be the uterine tubes. The uterine tubes at the bottom form a single fused tube, and that's going to become the uterus. This down here is going to become the vagina. And we're not going to have an elongated ureter. We're going to have a urethra. We're going to have a short urethra. So internally, that's what is going to happen. And by the time it's born, this is what it looks like. So look, there's those uterine tubes. There's the uterus. There's the vagina. And here's this short urethra. If we look externally, remember, here's our indifferent one. Well, look, we said this could become either a glans penis or a glans clitoris. Well, now it's going to become a glans clitoris. This opening is going to stay there. It's going to be opened up. It's going to form the opening to the vagina. These are going to become the labia majora, not a scrotum. And so if we look at that, it looks like this. So look, there's that opening. It's maintained. There's that glans. It's going to wind up looking like this. Here's the labia majora. And so when the baby's born, it's going to look something like this. Any questions? So if we sort of just summarize that, remember we've got the same tissues. This embryo or fetus is actually indifferent. And what's going to make it become one or the other is this testosterone. So if we have testosterone, this is all going to become a male. But if we don't have testosterone, no testosterone, then this is all going to become a female. So what do you think would happen if I took this embryo, even though this embryo is XX? What is XX, male or female? So genetically, this would be a female. But what if I took this XX, this genetic female, and I gave it some testosterone? What do you think would happen to it? What would happen to this? And what would happen to this? What would happen is it would look, even though it's genetically female, it would look male. By the same token, what if this were XY? So XY, genetically, what is XY, male or female? It's male, right? But what if I were to somehow withhold the testosterone? In other words, I don't let the testosterone form, or I keep it from happening. I'm going to withhold testosterone. Well, what's going to happen is, even though this is XY, it's going to look female. So again, the difference is this testosterone. So again, here's our indifferent, and then we go through the process. Remember, we have the X chromosome, HY antigen, testosterone. This happens. Here we have the Y chromosome, here we have XY. Here we have XX, there's no Y. And we're going to have no testosterone. And without testosterone, this happens. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. Well, this happens pretty early in gestation. But remember what's going to happen is, we talked about the testes. Remember, the testes have to leave the abdominal cavity and they have to enter the scrotum. And remember, they descend. And it takes place over the time of pregnancy, but they don't enter the scrotum until right around the time of birth. And so generally about 2 months before birth, they're moving, and they're going to leave the pelvic cavity and enter the scrotum. Remember, not only is the testes going to go, but so are blood vessels, so are nerves, muscles, all of that, and that forms a spermatic cord. Well, ovaries also move down a little bit too, but they don't pass through because they don't have this inguinal canal. But here's a 3-month fetus. There's the testis right there. Look how high up it is. And then if we go to a 7-month fetus, it's beginning to enter or pass through and beginning to enter the scrotum. And then right around the time of birth, it's fully entered. And there's our spermatic cord. Remember, blood vessels, nerves, the vas deferens, and all that. Well, after that, nothing much happens until puberty. Remember, puberty is when the sex hormones come into play. So It has to do with the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus at some point is going to begin to release GnRH. Remember GnRH in males? It's going to be different than in females, but they're both going to go to the anterior pituitary. We're going to get the release of FSH and LH. And what's going to happen is we're going to begin to go through puberty. And so LH in the male is going to cause testosterone to be produced. But LH in the female is going to cause estrogen to be produced. And it's these hormones that are going to cause these characteristics of puberty. So in males, we're going to get an enlargement of the testes and the scrotum and the penis. We're going to get these hair distribution growing, the lowering of the voice, the changing of the skeleton, the muscular changes and all that. Females, we're going to get enlargement of the breast. We're going to begin menses. We're going to start doing ovulation. It's also going to change the shape of this pelvis and so on. And then remember, males continue to produce sperm basically their whole lives, but females have a limited reproductive lifespan. So if you look at the female, puberty in most females at this day and age is around age 9 or 10. It used to be later than that. If you go back to the 1800s and 1700s, it was much later. It was 12 or 13. But nutrition has gotten better. We also spend more time in light. And so puberty has gotten younger. But there's a limited lifespan. So if you think about the woman who maybe lives to age 80 or something, that's not when reproduction stops. Reproduction stops usually around 45 or maybe 50. So it's really only about half of her life when she's reproductively capable. But at some point, what's going to happen is this hypothalamus is going to stop releasing GnRH. And with no GnRH, you're not going to have any FSH or LH. And so what's going to happen is the ovaries are going to cease to function. There's not going to be any more ovulation. Since we don't have any more estrogen or progesterone, we're not going to have the thickening of the lining, so we're not going to have menses when it drops off. Breast atrophy, reproductive organs atrophy. You also get a whole lot of other things that go along with it. And so you can see things like hot flashes and irritability. So people go through depression. And then, remember, they're going to also lose bone mass and muscle mass, and the skin is going to get thinner. And so if you look at menopause, here's a little graphic to kind of show you what it is. So here are the 7 dwarfs of menopause, kind of a play on Snow White. But anyway, there are these. So these are kind of the things that happen. Males, on the other hand, there is no equivalent to menopause. Remember what happens with testosterone, it slowly decreases with age, but there's no just stop where everything ceases entirely. Any questions? So can everybody see how we get from this to this in the male and this to this in the female? And understand the steps and why this SRY gene is what's responsible, but it works through the testosterone. And then if you have no SRY gene, you have no testosterone. So depending on how you look at it, females, or this situation, is sort of the base that everybody has. And then we add on top of this due to testosterone. Or you could say that because we have no testosterone, then you get a female. It's sort of the absence of testosterone that creates a female. So it just depends on how you look at it, but you could say femaleness is absence of maleness, because femaleness is just sort of the default. Any questions? Well, whichever way you like it is probably what determines how you look at males and females. But anyway, that's kind of how it works. And that's the end of the material and the end of the course. Any questions? Well, that didn't take very long, but that's where we're going to stop.